Good evening. Bear with me a bit. I've never really done this sort of thing before, though I did have a go at it this morning. I'm going to have to be referring to my notes a little bit. Not going to be too much demo, but there was a kind of, the whole process of working in VR on the Paul McCartney job was interesting to me. I learnt a load of stuff. But the first thing, that's me. Can we get my desktop up on the, thank you. So the first thing that I was advised by my very good friend Mike Matchdorf was make sure everybody knows that you're freelance and you are available for hire. Because, it's quite easy if people go, oh yeah, that Duncan Shepherd guy, he's clearly kind of well connected. He won't be needing any phone calls about employment. That's not true. There's my email. So basically, I was lucky enough to be invited to work at a company called, well, not work out there, but freelance out of Jaunt VR, which is a company in Los Angeles, and they've also got offices here, and they have an office in Palo Alto. And they are a company which is trying to develop the whole VR content and the VR, everything to do with VR. They have developed a great camera, which is a spherical camera with 24 lenses. It is both, it's VR 360. Well, it's a stereo VR camera. I know that you just alluded to what is the difference between VR and 360. 360 is when you have an all-around spherical view, but it's not in 3D. It's still it's a very impressive achievement. It's immersive. It's entertaining. I think that there's a lot to be said for not getting too wrapped up in the how good's the quality of the stitch, or the technical side of things, especially this early in the field, because we're at the very, very beginning of being able to experiment with VR, and the technology is really kind of like held together with bits of gaffer tape and rubber bands and things like that. So as we move forward, all this stuff will get more sophisticated. But in terms of analogy, and it's a very apt analogy, the difference between stereo VR and mono VR is probably going to feel the same as the difference between stereo audio and mono audio. We went through 50 or 60 years of listening to records, listening to songs in mono without any complaint. And that one of the things that I can attest to about that, we worked with Jeff Emmerich, who was the audio engineer on all the Beatles records, and we'd sort of sit at his knee and take all of his wisdom. He was working with us doing the sound design. He told us that all of the Beatles albums were mastered and designed to be listened to in mono. When they mixed those albums, they did it in mono. Any stereo mixes that exist were produced after the fact as a sort of request of the record company. So we're all perfectly happy with mono for a very long time, but now none of us would really countenance listening to anything in mono unless it was specifically a kind of archive track. That is, I can kind of think the way that it's worth thinking about stereo in VR. It is better, it's more immersive, it's more compelling, but it's much more complicated. It's harder to do, it's more expensive, and there's more likelihood of there being problems down the pike. So, that's what I feel about the difference between 360 and VR. They're both good, they both have their place. I think that, in general, the idea is the key thing, is the king. The technology just has to serve the idea. It's not really worth getting into a sort of frame of mind. We think, let's just think of a VR, 360 idea. You've got to have a great story or a great narrative or some great idea first. As I said, I was lucky enough to be working with the guys and girls at Jaunt, and I'd done a couple of little jobs and did a little music video. And when I first started there, they were adamant that you shouldn't really edit in VR. You couldn't kind of disrupt the viewer's point of view too much. You didn't want to upset their equilibrium. People worry about people feeling nauseous and all that sort of thing. And I was constantly being told to make this shot longer, make it 15 seconds, do a fade to black, bring a fade up from black. And that's not really where I come from. I learnt my chops as an editor in music videos in the 80s, and then commercials. And it was always, a playground, for me to tell stories and, make cuts and do changes and do things that were exciting. So as soon as I got an opportunity to do a music video for Jaunt, which was for a guy called Ray LaMontagne. The first thing I did was start jump cutting the dancers and doing that sort of thing, and it turned out really well. I mean, it was great fun. We put in some sort of mirror effects, so these girls seemed like they were crawling out of, liquid on the floor. Then you could flip them and have them crawling around on. There's nothing, if you can imagine seeing someone, well, you can probably go and see it, but seeing someone in 3D but crawling along the ceiling upside down, it's kind of sort of interesting, surreal space to find yourself viewing. I enjoyed it, and again with lots of editing, and we did some kaleidoscope effects. That encouraged me to keep trying to, pushing the art form forwards. So I had a conversation with the producer that I was working with, or the guy that invited me in there, Lucas Wilson. He's a great guy. We were talking one night, and I said, "Look, can I show?" And I was under NDA, so I didn't feel like I could freely talk about anything with anybody. I said, "Can I get some more creative editors, not editors, more creative directors, the kind of people that are making commercials and music videos?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And as it happened, I'd been Facebooking with Tony Kaye that weekend. I said, "Well, I don't know, Tony Kaye." And his eyes lit up. He obviously had heard of him. Either you have or haven't heard of Tony Kaye. And, he's a bit of a mad genius, but he is a genius. Do you know what I mean? He's a difficult kind of person to work with from time to time, but he is genuinely a genius, and it's really worthwhile kind of getting involved with it. So Lucas said to me, "Well, as it happens, we do have a top secret project coming up for Paul McCartney, which you can't tell Tony." But I knew that Tony was a massive Beatles fan, so I thought, well, that'll make a great mixture. And eventually, through a kind of process of playing, telephone ping pong the whole time, we got Tony into the Jaunt office under, not really quite knowing what he was coming in for. Got him to sign the NDA, which, well, actually, we told him what it was first, because he said, well, he would behave himself. He then asked to sign the NDA. He asked to have it printed out in very large type, which came out to 14 pages. And instead of just signing it, he signed it by painting all over it. He kind of just started scribbling his little notes. He's a very kind of, he likes to paint with watercolors and things. So he just kind of did this crazy cartoon Tony Kaye procedure where it took 15 minutes to sign the NDA in scribble, which Lucas sort of dutifully recorded for all of us for posterity. Yeah, so he came on board with the job, and the project was Paul McCartney was releasing a retrospective of his songs called Pure McCartney, and I think Paul's involved with Jaunt. I'm not quite sure, but I think there's some connection there somewhere. And he wanted to produce some virtual reality content for this for the rollout of the Pure McCartney retrospective. And all they had as an idea was that Paul had some favorite videos and songs that he'd done in the past, primarily videos. I think he had a list of 13 or so. And he wanted to incorporate something to do with VR into something to do with his videos, maybe revisit the places where they were shot, or I don't know. They just wanted to combine the two. Tony came up with some ideas. I'm sure they were very good. I didn't really see too many of them. We did some experimentation at my house, playing with the goggles. We'd actually put... just to see what things... one of the things I feel is very important with messing around with VR is you have to have the headset. You have to play with what it looks like. We have, because I use a Macintosh and Final Cut Pro 10, we use the Oculus Rift development kit too, which is not available anymore. You have to find them on eBay. They're as rare as hen's teeth. It cost me $5.50 for that one. But we would put bits of Kubrick films. I think I pulled down Tree of Life by Terrence Malick and The Shining and 2001, and just started throwing shots into this thing and had a look, and some stuff didn't work at all, but some of it was amazing. I mean, some of the stuff from specifically with the shot in The Shining where Danny is running through the maze at the end. It's like a famous Steadicam shot. That works really well in VR. It's like, if you don't mind, there's a big stitch line behind you. It's like sitting too close to an IMAX screen. It's a very kind of. I personally am going to watch all of my favorite films in the goggles one of these days because it's just kind of a great place to be. I've forgotten quite what I was talking about. Oh, that's right. We were experimenting with that sort of stuff. So we got Tony on board. He had his ideas about what he wanted to achieve with the shoot. So he went to London to meet with Paul McCartney, and this is a little bit their meeting. They bonded, and they decided, or Tony decided, that what he really wanted to do was put Paul in an environment where he was like in a rehearsal space. It's like they built it. It's his own barn, but the space wasn't used like this. They wanted to make it feel like Paul had his own little sort of jamming and sort of playroom musically. There was a couple of things that when we sent Tony to London, he was given a couple of rules. One of them was no blue screen, which is, as you can see, he kind of ignored immediately, because that's very much what he does. And that was just because, it didn't particularly. It's quite difficult to do roto work and anything that requires any painting. All the things we're used to being really easy now. I mean, a lot of us kind of, I do a lot of comping in Final Cut Pro 10 because it's really flexible. It's easy to sort of go, oh yeah, I'll just paint that out later. It'll be fine. It's not fine in stereo. It's really, really difficult. It requires professionals that do this sort of thing all the time. So no blue screen, please, Tony. That's how that worked out. The other thing that we were told not to do was no flashing lights, because the Jaunt camera and all these cameras, it's computational photography. So if anybody ever uses optical flow, you know what it looks like when you get optical flow and the sunlight goes through the lens flare. Just everything goes melty and weird. So we were told no flashing lights, and Tony's response to no flashing lights was this sort of thing. Which is great, I mean, it's an amazing piece of footage, and it definitely balls the camera up to a certain extent. You can kind of see where the panels are getting flared on and things like that. So anyway, Tony went and basically was platform agnostic. He didn't care about the camera. He just wanted to, he just wanted to follow the story, basically. He was already a huge fan of Paul McCartney's, obviously. And went down there and just tried to bond with him. I think that they only had 2.5 hours of actual shoot time with Paul. They might have got about half an hour or an hour extra because they got on with each other. At one point, I think that Paul was working on some new songs, and he invited Tony into the recording studio to kind of talk to him, which Tony was kind of like, he's like a little kid, I mean, you can imagine your lifelong, your hero invites you in to listen to his new songs. Tony then proceeded to give him notes. To improve the song, and he gave him notes in the form of a painting. So he's kind of got this kind of weird, 5-foot wide big scribble of like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing all these other things. But essentially, they got on. And I think that Paul McCartney he's a very accomplished guy. I mean, he's very talented, he's intelligent, but he's told these stories lots of times. It's easy for him if you just kind of set him going, and he will go. That's one of the nice things one of the things you'll all know about VR is, well, like I said, you can cut it, but the guy's just standing there. You can't really stand in the frame and coach him, and you can't do multiple takes, and you can't sort of mess around too much. So we were lucky that Paul McCartney was so adept at telling his stories, and essentially, the stories that he was telling us were really about how he wrote the songs, or what the inspiration for his songs was, and then what the story of the video was, because that was really where he was coming from. So they'd chosen the five songs that they wanted to focus on, and they'd film him. That's pretty much what happened in London. 2.5 hours of Paul McCartney time, that generates a certain amount of dailies, 2.5 hours of dailies, really. The process with the Jaunt system is that, like I say, that camera's got 24 lenses in it, which really was 24 cameras. They all have a little card in them. The DIT pulls the cards, they slam them into a computer, it all gets uploaded to the cloud. The Jaunt system, the way that Jaunt works, it's not really a camera company. They're actually... they're more like a film company. They're more like a film company like Kodak. What they do, what they provide for you that is valuable, is that they stitch all of your footage in the cloud. And the stereo stitching, I mean, there will be people here that have done both mono and stereo stitching, and anybody that's done stereo stitching will attest to the fact that it's quite a complicated business, because, it's not as simple as just having two lenses side by side. You've got all these lenses all around the camera. The Jaunt camera actually doubles up on the lenses, I think. So if you've got, two lenses here, this is, you've got a left and a right, and then this will be the left and right of the next pair. So they're getting used more than once for a different part of a stereo pair. To generate this kind of 3D image. So I just have a little stop whilst I get my breath back. So basically, you've gone to the shoot, you shot some footage, it's in the cloud, and now it's time to sort of think about the post-production. And like I said, I'd already had some experience of working with the Jaunt system, but not much. It's kind of an experiment. It's a work in progress anyway. It keeps changing from sort of week to week what their systems will do and what they will allow. But I've been a Final Cut Pro 10 editor for about 3 years. I think once I felt it got sort of serious at about 10.7. I remember Sam Messman wrote loads of blogs that encouraged me to get involved in it. So, and I've only worked in Final Cut Pro 10 since then. So I've got quite, I'm quite comfortable in that environment. All of the things that make you pull your hair out, they've made me pull my hair out. I've lost loads of weekends from, trying to solve problems. But essentially, it now feels pretty stable, and I'm pretty good at fixing it when it breaks. Well, I say that, actually, it'll probably break now. But the reason I bring that up is because this was a big project. We didn't quite know how all the post-production workflow was going to really net out. I mean, and I like to know, like I'm sure you all like to know, where's our workflow? Because if you don't know your workflow, you're going to be burning through money or your time or both. All sorts of things can go wrong if you haven't got it right. Lots of people here will probably remember what happened when the Red camera came out. People were making mistakes that took them into some really expensive cul-de-sacs very quickly, whether it was just missing deadlines or inability to grade the footage after they'd transferred it all to HD tape or some stupidity. And it's a similar sort of thing. You can get yourself into trouble quite quickly with stereo VR if you don't know where the elephant traps are. And like I say, having done a couple of jobs and being really comfortable in Final Cut Pro and its ability to just ingest tons of media at different resolutions and design my own frame rates and my own sort of aspect ratios, I was pretty confident that we could manage this job, which was going to be lots of archive photography, lots of archive video from different eras. I mean, we would get videos that were made in the 70s and 80s that were obviously 4:3 and had originally been interlaced, and they'd be transferred to ProRes badly by weirdly different people. And in England, we used to have an anamorphic system, so some of them would be anamorphic. So all sorts of weird, wonderful stuff. The other thing that we had to bear in mind with our workflow was that we had a VFX team. We had a couple of guys called Nick and Zach Young. They have their own company called Machine Eyes, and they were our 3D VFX guys. One of them works on Houdini. He's very talented. That's Nick, and his brother Zach is actually more the kind of person who communicates to me when I need to tell Nick to do something. But he would also be the guy that would work with us on After Effects. And essentially, they were on task to just help us with anything that might come up, because we knew things were going to come up with this production, because all we had was a shot of Paul standing in a room. It's a nice room, it's full of guitars and things, and we liked it, but that was probably not going to cut the mustard with the rest of the world out here, in terms of like Paul McCartney's great big kind of new deal. So we had to make sure that we were covered with that. And in addition to that, the Jaunt organization has their own VFX department, and they will be used. If you have a problem with the stitching in any way, or there's any like these light flare problems, that will go into their department. So we had the two things. We had a little boutique VFX department that we had to consider turnovers to and pipeline and all that sort of thing. And then we had the big organization, which had a very specific way of working. They wanted their shots numbered in a certain way. They wanted it delivered in a certain way. We had to kind of fit in with their kind of strictures. However, like I say, we felt pretty confident that it was going to work out for us. On the whole, editing, VR, it's kind of, I mean, it can be kept simple. It's actually analogous to working, 10 or 15 years ago when you didn't do, I mean, I did composite most of the stuff in Final Cut and did the deliveries from there, but, there was a time when I couldn't do my own grading because it was all on film, or I couldn't do my own VFX works because I was working on Avid or whatever it was. It wouldn't, it wasn't the high enough resolution. It wasn't until I went to Final Cut that we went into HD, where that sort of thing was possible. So, if you're thinking in terms of offline-online paradigm where you make your cut and then we used to order the cut and egg, we get that colored and stuff, and we drop all that stuff in later. So it's a little bit more like that workflow, in that you've got your offline stuff, but like I say, you need to be generating high-quality dailies at some point to have a look at them. The rest of the post-production process is, and I'll just speak just quickly about the picture quality and the size. The frames that you get on these images are 2304 by 2304 in the previews. But they're 3840 by 3840 when it's the final deliverable master. And the way we dealt with that in Final Cut was we used compound clips. So Final Cut will we'll always try and deliver the best quality image on an output. I've been told. We looked at it, and it seemed to be, that was told that by Darren Rourke, who's a friend of mine and a very great assistant. Essentially, so we knew that if we put the preview quality footage into compound clips and worked with those and did all of our editing, when we got to the point where we could put in the high quality stuff, we could just go into the compound clip, drop that shot on top, and then come back out, and our cuts would be filled with high quality media and everything's in the right place. We don't actually have to do a conform of any sort, which is kind of a halfway house from being able to do the proxy workflow, because obviously you can't do that if you're getting more media coming in. The other thing that's significant just about the Jaunt workflow is that they develop all of the outputs for you automatically. So we finish one broadcast master, if you like, in 3840 by 3840, all nice and beautiful, have it colored. It's a single file as a video file. Then we send that up to Jaunt's cloud, and it will output all the various different types of flavor of VR that you require. There'll be stereo for telephones, stereo for desktops, stereo for game centers, mono for all of those things, the Web 360 videos that you see, that'll all get spat out as one big cluster. So that's useful from our point of view because we don't have to worry about it. I keep getting asked by people talking to me about VR, and one of the first things they ask me is, what are the rules of VR? What can we do and what can't we do? And I would say that the rule of VR is the same as the rule of all filmmaking. You've got to be able to try, you and the director have got to be able to try whatever stupid idea you come up with, or brilliant idea, you have to be able to look at it in context, in the viewer, and work with it. And if you haven't got an editorial system or a mindset with an editorial system that can handle strange requests and sudden whims, and I want to see this shot with a million guitars plastered all over it. I want to see this shot with a man on a scooter driving through the thing. I mean, anything can come up. You have to be able to just chop and change and grab shots and chop them up and throw them all over the place and move things around and change the order of sequences and find lines. You have to be able to move in the same way that you can when you're editing normal video. It's not good enough to go, oh, this is VR, it goes much slower. I mean, there is rendering and stuff like that, and sometimes it does just become impossible to go that fast, but it's not good enough to just say, well, it's different now, we don't have to produce the same quality output as we do in regular TV or broadcast or film. I think that the bar is still as high as it always was. It's all about the idea. It's not about the technology at all. It's always about the idea and the artistry. Now, one of the things that makes it possible for us to do that, and one of the reasons I'm here today, is that this viewer is only usable by editors using Macs because Tim Dashwood invented a viewing system for us to use. There are probably other ones out there now, but he's the guy that came up with the idea, and it's the only way that you can work in this field. You can't just go, oh, I'll guess or I'll assume. It's too difficult. You just don't get the full experience of what you need to build a film or a story or a narrative that is going to be compelling to other people. So we got all of our bits of media together, and I transcribed it using some tips from my friend Michael Garber, who you basically just transcribe and you add these things as notes and you're able to find things searchable. Reviewing the dailies with Tony was adamant that we weren't going to cut anything. He said, you're not the editor, Duncan, you're the editor. You're just going to have to add stuff. And I was like, well, fuck me, now I've got to kind of, I thought it was going to be a month-long job. I've agreed a flat rate for it. Now it's going to be 4 or 5 months of my life. However, that's what happened. We just had to kind of eat that. But part of his reasoning for that was, well, firstly, the Paul McCartney experience is compelling to be in the room with Paul McCartney. If you feel like you're actually there and he's playing his mandolin and he's telling you a story about, I went to a guitar shop and I kind of tried this mandolin and the chord structure was different and that inspired me to write a song. For us, that was interesting and we thought, well, how are we going to do that? And Tony, like I say, said, well, I just want to put everything all over the place. So from that point of view, it's important to be able to manage all your media and think about. This is the reason that this came up. Really, there's a view that you need to force the viewer to look in a specific direction or give them a specific part of the story. But ultimately, people look wherever the hell they like. Whenever I show anything to anybody, they're always looking in the different direction. They never look in the direction I think they should be looking in. Some people just look straight ahead the whole time. Some people look at, like, professionals in the business are always looking at the roof. I don't know why that is. They're always kind of like looking straight up, or the floor. I think they're looking for something specific. But you can't make people. You can goad them sometimes. You can put a little bell ringing or something. They will look round. You can do that sort of thing. But in a way, we had to assume that we couldn't tell where people were going to look, so we might as well put stuff everywhere, because then at least they'll always see something. And even though it doesn't really come across looking at it in this format, you can see that. And this, I mean, you probably all know that the equirectangular format is like looking at one of those maps of the world where you've got the North Pole and the South Pole, and those top and bottom areas are grossly exaggerated because they're spread out. So you can see the bottom, all that mess at the bottom is just the camera equipment. It's just the stand that the camera's on. It's actually only this big, but it's spread out across the whole room. But all around the room, we tried to put elements that would be are interesting and part of the story. Here we had Paul talking about him in London, looking for just like what he does when he's hanging out in London. There was a bit of one of Paul's paintings. He's talking about a guitar shop. We had some bits of titles thrown into the screens up there. And then this is the thing that Tony liked, just lots of flash frames of guitars. Keep doing that sort of thing. I want madness. It's just fucking brilliant. It's fucking brilliant. We just love it. So we'd do that sort of thing. One of the things we did quite like was the chords with the mandolin playing. The video for this job was shot by Michel Gondry. I love Michel Gondry as well. I think it's amazing. I probably am doing him a disservice by only thinking of his work in terms of cardboard cutouts, but that sort of does happen sometimes when you do that. But we did think that one of the things that I noticed from people watching, me watching videos as well, people, especially guitar players, they like to try and find out what the hell's going on with when I looked into the chord structure, there are lots of postings of people saying, I think he's playing an E flat major or declined seventh, whatever it is. So we wanted to make this something for the fans to enjoy, because fans are probably going to be the people that will bother loading up the app and looking at it on their phones. So for us, things like, as an example, the chords, which were not particularly easy to track down, because, like I say, the mandolin has a peculiar chord structure, which we had to, divine from the internet. And then, I would basically, Alex, we had a designer on the team, Alex Conkey. He would design these cardboard cutout images. Then I'd stick them into the frame, roughly, but for timing. Then we'd hand these across to Machine Eyes, and they would develop the imagery so that we could actually have just cardboard cutout frames appearing, but they'd look flat inside the goggles. One of the things that does happen when you add things in, you can either put up with things just kind of appearing spherical towards you, or you can actually try and correct it and make things look properly flat. They're both quite good, but one is slicker. So that's, Tony's desire to have stuff everywhere and all over the place, because like I say, he knew that it would be important for the viewer to always have something interesting to look at. Another little point here with what's going on in the screen in the middle, where Paul's just playing the mandolin. That is just pulled from one of the Jaunt cameras. We can pull the individual files and just slam that in anywhere that we like. So just get to my next page. I'm drastically running out of time. The only problem with this is it's lots of work for me, or whoever's working with me. And generally, it's just me. It's a huge amount of media. These things are all 5 minutes long. Anybody that's had to pad out anything with bits of still photography that is maybe not cleared, you're getting it from the internet, then you go back to Paul's people, say, can we have pictures like this? Or you're generating these chords. I have to go to the artist. He has to paint them. He has to send them back to me. He sends them back to me as stills. They're always different weird resolutions from his Canon. That sort of media management is complex but manageable inside, as long as you've got your folder structure worked out, or you've got your roles worked out. Specifically, we work very, very, very strongly in roles. We like that sort of thing because it just does split all of our media up. That gets that beast slightly more under control. But like I said, there was a lot of different media types and frame rates and weird things going on. Just briefly talking about the back end of the job, I know that I kind of jumped into showing this, but when you get to your turnover situation, when you're sending stuff out to VFX people or color or sound, being on top of the rolls really pays a dividend there. I didn't realize until I did this job that you can use rolls to export video stems. So I can split up the background, the chords, the things that are on these screens. So you've got one in the middle and two on the side. I can split those all up into separate layers as rolls, and just forget about them. And then when it comes to doing an output, I can set the final cut up to do a export video as rolls, and it will spit out 4 or 5 files, all in ProRes 4x4 with the correct alpha channels, which I can then send to somebody else to generate holdout mats or work on different aspects of the production. So for us, I call this the Zwiner method because Brian Zwiner's my assistant. He's a great guy. But that aspect of Final Cut's organization, for me, really pays dividends. And it's kind of like I keep learning something new every time I switch the bloody thing on. I only recently got used to the timeline index, but it's a piece of software that rewards perseverance with learning how to make it work. Okay, so that's a little bit of a dance. I was only showing that just to illustrate, stuff going on around you. We actually concentrated on my talk. It really is supposed to be concentrated on part of the job called My Valentine, which was Paul McCartney talking about the writing of this song, My Valentine, which he wrote for his new wife, Nancy, and making the video. And making the video, he directed it himself, and he had Wally Pfister, a cameraman, to shoot it. It was all about film. The whole story of that was film. It was a filmic story. Paul McCartney wanted to do black and white on film. Nobody's shooting on film anymore. That was a story that we wanted to mirror with the way that we approached the production of the job. And we had our designer came up with some mock-ups, some ideas for what that might look like if we were to. Don't want to do an export. If we were to do, this sort of thing, we thought that would be, that might work out quite nicely for us. Like I say, it was about romance and film. So we had this idea that we wanted to. Alex wasn't designing for VR. He was just designing flat imagery. But we knew that we wanted it to be romantic, and we knew that we wanted it to be filmic. Our job as editors and post-producers was to make that sort of thing, and you can see there's a bit of China Garth writing, there's a bit of Paul McCartney kind of like singing, there's just texture and elements and artistry and kind of like a handmade quality to it. We wanted to be true to that vision as much as we could. So we, after many weeks of work, we were able to, and I've had to take out all the bits of Paul because this ultimately I can't show Paul inside this format, but essentially we had elements of the video that Paul shot with Natalie Portman and Johnny Depp. We had bits of animation that Alex would send us. I made these leaders up. We had bits of still photography, bits of animation, just like it's like a collage, a kind of found thing. Inside the headset, this is quite an interesting piece of art. I mean, we were very keen on it. I think it's personally, it's my favorite. It's something that I think is where I would like to be when I'm kind of making things. What I probably should have said as part of the setup to this is that the reason we did it this way is when Tony shot Paul. Like I say, we had a narrative, and the narrative was about writing the song and then making the video. The take that was the best of him making the video wasn't shot on the Jaunt camera, it was shot on a Red camera. So we had a kind of, we had a problem like, well, how are we going to do a VR program when we haven't switched the VR camera on? We did take some other takes with the VR camera, but the best ones, the ones that Tony wanted to use, weren't on the VR camera. So we had to design a VR space that wasn't in the VR camera. It was just something that we thought was artistic. So I should have said that earlier, but now I'm saying it. Essentially, that was our desire. We spent about 6 weeks on this project. It was 5 minutes long. Like I say, we were really happy with it. Thought it went very well. Paul did originally like it and then didn't like it. So, and Paul McCartney's not somebody that you say, well, I'm sorry you spent the money, we're not doing anything else. Paul McCartney is somebody that you say, okay, Paul, well, what would you like to do? So basically, Paul liked the Jaunt stuff, loved the story, wanted us to continue to explore whatever we could with that. As luck would have it, we did have other takes. We had, if I can just find the cut. We had this take, which was Paul giving the same discussion about making the video, which we were happy to use. Not quite sure why my computer's staggering, but it is. As you can see, the obelisk from 2001 has made an appearance. That's because the DIT on the set recorded over one of the cards. So this black slab, which is not in the same place for the top and bottom eye, is all one camera. And we were told that to fix that, I mean, normally I'd say, yeah, we'll just paste it out. It's easy. I could do that on Final Cut. You can't do that in Final Cut. It's much more complicated. There's lots of stereo issues. We were told it was just going to cost far too much money to do. So think of a new idea. We'd already blown through all the budget by this stage. Obviously, we'd already made the other films. This is last minute. Paul decided he didn't like it. So we had this one take, which was broken, and we had this take, which we loved, which is just Paul sitting at the piano doodling. But he's doodling in a way that is kind of he's playing through little bits of My Valentine. Tony's obviously setting up with the red camera, either not turning it on or turning it on. And this was what we used as our basis for the requirement from the client to have the Jaunt camera be a major part of the take. So our solution was to use this as the bedrock of our take because we loved it, and what he's doing is great. And like I say, inside the 3D view of the headset, whilst you're looking at Paul McCartney sitting just there playing the piano, that's a fantastic place to be. It's a piece of documentary kind of narrative. It's a nice thing to watch. Tony likes to be in the film, so that's always good if he's on camera. So our solution was to keep true to the idea of it being filmic, and pull the one camera that was okay of Paul where he is, the one, well, not the one camera that's okay, but pull the camera where he's standing there clean and clear, and turn that into a take that looks like this, which is not really analogous to movie because it's the wrong way around, but we felt we could use this to tell the story of Paul's story and still put it inside the Jaunt room. So we did that. It's worth bearing in mind that when you add things in VR with the spherical view, if you haven't got some way to correct this image, it will distort. At the top and bottom, it will do the thing that the North and the South Pole do, or Greenland gets really big. Paul McCartney's head will stretch, basically. You don't want that. If you've got like your primary artists, you don't want them getting distorted. By the time we'd got to this stage, we'd lost our VFX department who were doing all of that spherical correction for me. But again, Tim Dashwood stepped in, and he had a beta version of a bit of a plugin that would work with Final Cut and with After Effects and with everything, that we could make that correction and throw these things into the cut. So once I had that, I was able to generate a bit of film like this, which is now, this looks weird, but in fact, if you're looking at that in the headset, that compression top and bottom makes it look flat. Just looks like a sort of 8-foot-high slab in front of you. So we were able to use that to think about ways to finish the job without having a budget or a VFX department to help us. And then the very last thing I'm going to talk about, because I've literally got 20 seconds left, is the video of My Valentine was made in 3 different versions. It's Natalie Portman, doing sign language with Johnny Depp. And they did a version that was like the main edit, and they did another version that was just Natalie on her own in one take. And they did another version that was just Johnny on his own in one take. So we thought, well, that obviously, then that's going to work out for us. It's virtual reality. We can throw all 3 of them at the same time. So we did. And like I say, in the virtual reality goggles, and it's one of the limitations of this discussion is I can't show you what it looks like because you all have to put the goggles on. That's not going to work. But essentially, the way that this virtual reality space is structured, it's triangular. You're looking at a big cinema screen in front of you that's got a bit of film tailing up and down, and then off to this side you've got Johnny Depp, and off to this side you've got Natalie Portman. And for me, as an editor, I find that's more fun as a split screen than anything I can manage in the flat world. To be able to show other illustrations of things that are interesting. You know, you could theoretically do a music video on one side and a behind-the-scenes video here, and an interview with Paul McCartney here. You could, and then when you turn your head, the audio focus will change depending on what you end up looking at. So basically, now that I know that I'm very nearly at the total end of this discussion, is really what I like to think of as back to the rules again. The rules of VR are: have a narrative, have a story, have an idea, have your art, have your beauty, have the thing that is the thing. The reason you're all in filmmaking anyway isn't to solve technical problems, it's to solve artistic ones. And as long as you keep that as the reason why you're doing stuff, the VR film will fall out of that naturally. You know what I mean? There will be, there are going to be hurdles to get over, and there's going to be things to have to deal with. You can't do quite so much special effects, but you can do perfectly adequate editorial effects, the kind of things that were very popular in filmmaking in the 60s and 70s. All of that stuff's still available to us. Even simple kind of vertical wipes. I've done some stuff where you just you double up somebody in the same space. It's quite compelling to watch one person repeated 6 times, but they're in 3D. It feels like you're in a room full of doppelgangers. So, there's lots of surreal ideas, and there's lots of ability to do this kind of narrative documentary thing where you're interviewing somebody because you feel like you're in the room with them, there's plenty of places to explore the artistry and the art of telling your story, and that's. I think I'll leave it at that.